smooth you into the role. Last week we started this new series about the most important week in history. The most important week in history. It is that the week Jesus enters Jerusalem, leading up to his death and resurrection. It started with Palm Sunday, which we talked about last week, and then it's from Sunday to Sunday, the most important week in history. It changes everything. And we often focus on the cross and the resurrection, which we're going to do as well, part of the series, which I'm excited about. But we're going to do everything that happened, every major thing that happened that week is what we are doing leading up to Easter. And of course, Easter Sunday, we'll be talking about his resurrection, celebrating his resurrection. The kids on Easter Sunday as well, got something special planned for the kids with some Easter eggs and stuff like that on that Easter Sunday as well. And the week after, it's kind of like everything has just kind of come together. The week after, I'm like right there, this thing. Let's go here. All right, so that might be why it doesn't work, because I just throw it around the place. But the week after Easter happens to be, traditionally the week after Easter and the week after Christmas are our lowest two attended Sundays. So we have that, but also it happens to be Anzac Day long weekend, which happens every few years. And traditionally we thought, you know what, people are probably going to be away, going to be holidaying. We're going to take that Sunday off after Easter. We're not going to meet that week. We're just going to have some time with your family and give all of our workers a bit of a rest as well. And so Easter Sunday, that's when it's all happening. We're all going to come and just, if you're in town, it's a good Sunday to be here. And then and the week after that, we're gonna take a rest week, have a family week, we'll call it. So keep that in mind. But anyway, last week we started off with Palm Sunday. We talked about that, the beginning of what's also known as Passion Week, and how Jesus redefined true power. And we often think of power in terms of domination and control, and that's what the people of Israel expected too. They expected a king who would dominate and destroy their Roman oppressors, a king who would rule over them in the whole world with power, by force. He was coming in, they're looking forward to this guy who's going to take care of everyone, just knock them, clear them all out, and he's going to rule them, and they're super excited about that. But Jesus didn't come to dominate and control. He showed his true power was humility, and service was true power. And we look at that and we go, no, that's not true power. That's the opposite of power. That's what Jesus came to do. He subverted, he changed everything. He flipped it on its head. It's not about domination and control, but true power is shown through humility and service. They wanted a king to overthrow Rome, but Jesus came to overthrow sin and death. His mission wasn't to overthrow Rome, it was to redeem humanity. It was to create a way that mankind could have a relationship again with God. That was his mission. And it would take him to a place of sacrifice and death, not some throne. Now, the challenge to each of us was, how do we perceive power in our own lives? Do we seek to dominate or control, or do we lead through humility and service? Will we follow a king who redefines power? Will you let go of pride and control to embrace humility and service? Not an easy challenge, not an easy thing to take on board, not easy thing to do. Will we follow Jesus through humility and not force? So we're going to look at the next thing on his agenda as he entered Jerusalem. He came in, but I used to get in trouble a lot as a kid due to my, I'll say, high sense of justice. It never sat well with me when someone was either picked on or someone was kind of left out, and so I used to get myself in trouble a lot because I'd either mouth off to the people that were picking on some kid, or try and include someone, and sometimes get in fights with people who didn't want to allow that to happen. And I like things to be fair, and I still struggle sometimes with letting things go today, jumping into situations I should just stay out of, because I'm like, oh, that's not fair. You jump in and try and do something and get myself in trouble. But when I was young, I even remember to the point when I was like, I would watch a movie maybe I'm crazy, but maybe others have thought of this as well, but you watch a movie and see like incredible injustice in history. And whether it be different classes, whether it be different races, whether it be different whatever it is, you go back in history and you see this historic video and you go, oh, that's horrid, that's terrible, I hate that. And I used to go, and I remember having this multiple times, dreaming going back in a time machine, of course with modern weapons, and sorting them all out. How dare you mowing them all down, because that's the just thing to do. But imagine walking into a place that you thought was sacred, right? It's maybe a church, a charity, a community space you thought would be safe or sacred or whatever, only to realize it's more about money and power than it is about people and prayer. Or rather than helping people, it was about exploiting them as a means to an end. Unfortunately, the church throughout the years has made itself a bit of a reputation for doing things like this. Through pushing people for money, through abusing their workers with no thought of, overloading them. Just, hey, we'll just use these guys up, throw them out, get another one. Whatever it is, that sort of, abusing people, overuse of power. Or in certain churches, it becomes about status and elitism. And therefore, people are excluded. We have groups and so on. How does it feel when the spaces meant for life and worship become places of greed and exclusion? Get a bit disillusioned, don't we? We get it. It angers me, but we expect certain places. We expect certain places like church, community spaces, family spaces, home life to be safe, to be life-giving. But when we see corruption or brokenness there, it leaves us disillusioned. Many of us know the sting of disillusionment, whether it's discovering that a leader we admired abused their power, or realizing a system we trusted was rigged against the vulnerable. It's devastating. I've experienced this. I've shared many times. There's a couple of mentors of mine at different parts of my life when you go, oh, I look up to these guys. I want to be like these guys. They're incredible. And then you realize they were abusing their situation for themselves. Whether through different acts of corruption. They use their positions not to help others, but for their own personal gain. And it devastates you, it crushes you. How could I have wanted to be like that person? I thought that was great. And then all this is happening behind the scenes. Well, this isn't a new problem. Corruption in sacred places isn't just a modern issue. It's exactly what Jesus confronted in the temple. And so after we had the Palm Sunday, which we talked about last week, Jesus arrived into Jerusalem on a little donkey, humbly, not with great big fanfare. He arrives, and then after he enters the city, he goes to the temple, the place of worship, the sacred place, the place where people should be welcomed and included. And we're going to go, if you brought your Bibles, you can turn to the book of Luke in the New Testament, Luke chapter 19. Otherwise, I will have it on the screen behind me, but sometimes the screen's a bit washed out, but we'll do our best here. But Luke chapter 19 and verse 45. Jesus comes in. So Luke 19:45 says, then he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and bought in it, saying to them, it is written, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. He taught daily in the temple, but the chief priests, the scribes, and the leaders of the people tried to kill him, yet they could not find a way to do it, for all the people were very attentive to hear him. Side note, this is one of those key moments that all the religious leaders there in Israel are going to try and kill Jesus. And of course, we know by the end of the week, after he's betrayed, they are going to take him and get him crucified. But this is one of those things that angered him because he called out injustice. He called out exploitation and greed. So as Jesus enters the temple, a place meant for worship, a place meant for inclusion, a place meant where people can come and freely learn about God and worship God, he finds exploitation and greed. The temple was the place where people would come and offer their sacrifices. The Jewish sacrificial system was set up back in the days of Moses, and there was sacrifices of all sorts of things. Different ones at different times of the year. You have certain ones for sin offerings, others for Thanksgiving offerings, some for dedications and so on. It was a busy place. Their offerings were part of their worship to God, part of what they had been brought up with, part of what they'd been taught to do. And they'd come to the temple and they'd be able to buy. I mean, you're in Jerusalem, it's a big city, right? You'd be able to come, and it's not like everyone's a farmer, so you'd be able to come and buy the lamb that you needed. You'd be able to come and buy a dove that you might have needed for a certain sacrifice. You'd be able to come and buy grain, because there's certain sacrifices that require that, and you come, and there's a spot there for you to come and purchase it. And sacrifice does cost us something, so it should cost us, right? But they came there, and they'd be able to buy those things, depending on the purpose, and they'd go, and then they'd present it to the priests. There's nothing wrong with providing this service, but it had evolved into good business. And price gouging was occurring. And the size of this marketplace had grown exponentially. So this is the temple in those days. This is what's known as Herod's temple. And we have these kind of major areas here. We have the court of the Gentiles. It's important to know the court of the Gentiles, anyone was welcome in there. It didn't matter if you were a proselyte or you changed from, whatever you believe to believe with what the Jews believed. It didn't matter anything. It was, the court of the Gentiles was free to anyone. If you were inquisitive about the temple, come on in. Court of the Gentiles, come on in. Come check it out. And then you have the women's court, which is only called the women's court because basically any Jewish people were allowed in there. And then you have the temple building where only the priests were allowed. I don't know why they call it the women's court. It's just basically women and men were all in there together. And that's where a lot of the teaching would happen. That's where a lot of the action was happening in there. And then you have the temple building where the priests would be, and only this little tiny strip. I don't have the little thing. A little tiny strip between the temple building and that wall at the end of the women's court is, I guess, the space where you come and only the men were allowed in that little tiny spot. But basically, all the action happened in the women's court and the court of the Gentiles. That's where there's a busy place. And the court of the Gentiles there was where this market had been set up. And so you come on in, and basically it got so big that the court of the Gentiles was just one massive marketplace. Farmers market on Saturdays, court of the Gentiles, and it was full on. And you could go and you buy anything you wanted there. And not only was it inappropriate due to the exorbitant prices they were charging, taking advantage of people, but they were making it very difficult for the poor to worship God. Thanks. Got my cup. You can have it back if you want. For service. So not only were they making it really hard for the poor, so they're charging exorbitant prices, they're making it hard for the poor to come and afford to buy their things, to do it, with all this price gouging that was happening, but they had excluded Gentile seekers of God. The place that anyone from any race was welcome to come and seek God was no longer a place to learn and discover. It was no longer a place where people could come in and there's discussions there and there's teaching there in the court of the Gentiles for anyone who wanted to come and listen and learn. It had become a very bustling, noisy marketplace. So the whole point of having this lighthouse, if you will, for people seeking God to come and learn, it was taken over by business. And there was no space for that anymore. And so you can imagine this anger that Jesus feels as he comes in, as he's come to not only just die for the Jewish people, he's come to die for all people, for all mankind, that they can have a relationship with God. And he says, you have excluded the rest of the world. You've excluded anyone who would try and come and seek to find out more. And so he was very upset with this. And he comes in, he doesn't just drive people out. He doesn't just turn over tables. He turns over their expectations of what worship should be. Jesus is like, I'm not putting up with this. This is not what it should be like. This is not what it's about. And then Jesus quotes, in that passage there in Luke 19, where we're at, he quotes Isaiah 56 and Jeremiah 7:11 when he states, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. This isn't just about the money they were making, it's about justice. This temple was meant to be a place of inclusion and worship for all nations. But it became a place of exclusion and exploitation. And so he's coming in there, he's like, no, this is not what it's about. Nope. And he's come in, he's done this. He's turned things over. He's like, we're not going to stand for this. Jesus' anger wasn't him simply flying off the handle. It was a prophetic act, as we see in Jeremiah, to restore the temple's true purpose. When places meant to reflect God's character instead reflect greed, injustice, or exclusion, it damages faith and it wounds people. You listen to people's stories. I hear it all the time. Oh yeah, I used to go to church and this happened. Or I found this was the case. It damages faith. It damages it. Last week we saw, instead of the controlling, dominating king, Jesus came as a servant king. We saw how the people expected Jesus to rid them of the Romans, but Jesus came to serve and rid them of the curse of sin. Well, this week we see Jesus as the subversive Messiah. He flipped everything on its head. The word subvert is usually used in a bad way, like to overthrow, to sabotage, to undermine. But I couldn't really think of a better word. Because Jesus does overthrow our expectations. He does flip everything on its head. He does undermine our thoughts on things. And he goes, no, that's not how it's going to be. That's not how it should be. The Jewish people expected the Messiah to fight their enemies, which was Rome, but Jesus fights their internal corruption. He goes, no, I'm focusing on you. Don't worry about the corrupt government you're under. How about the corrupt heart that you've got right now? He defied the expectations of a conquering king by targeting internal corruption rather than external enemies. Jesus came to change everything. Last week we saw he redefined what true power is. And this week I hope we'll see that he cares more about justice and a place of inclusion where all can have an opportunity to learn about him or worship him than he does about the process, the tradition, and so on, that we often make so important. It didn't matter. He who really cares is a heart for all to learn about him, to have a place, a safe space to worship and learn about him. Jesus' actions are a model for how we're called to confront injustice and restore true worship. Now, the challenge to you and I through all this is, rather than looking at others and seeing all the problems and all the issues they have, we need to ask ourselves, where have we allowed corruption or complacency to seep into our lives, seep into our church, to seep into our systems? What injustice and corruption is going on within ourselves? Forget what's going on around you. You might be really upset this morning because of the election results, or you might be super excited. Maybe you got done with a dodgy person. I don't know what's in area. Most of us are either in Wanneroo or Lansdale sort of things. I won't go down there, but like maybe you're upset right now. Like, oh, it's corrupt. I can't believe these people are leading us. Let's focus on ourselves. Oh, I can't believe that person's here at church today with all that going on. They're like, hey, focus on ourselves. Oh, I can't believe this person at work, and how am I supposed to talk to them when they've done that? Let's focus on ourselves first. What injustice and corruption is going on within ourselves? Don't be as concerned about others. How about my life? Let's make this practical. We like to make it practical. We talk about having practical faith. So I got 4 things for us as we leave today. Some ways to respond to Jesus' call to justice and purity. First thing we want to do is challenge your worship. Reflect on whether your faith practices have become self-centered or transactional or simply going through the motions for tradition's sake. Why do I do what I do? Why do I come and I sing through some songs, or I come and I flick through my Bible, what's going on with your faith practices? Have they become self-centered? Have they become transactional? You're doing it so you can keep God happy with you or whatever? Or you're just going through the motions for tradition's sake because you've just always been brought up to do that? Is your worship focused on what you can get from God or on giving him your heart? Is he really the focus of it all? Challenge your approach and reasoning for worship. Worship is so much more than just singing. We worship through giving. We worship through, most importantly, worship through following Jesus with our life, because he is the most important to us. We all worship something. Worship is simply your response to what you value most. Challenge your worship. Second thing we're going to do is challenge injustice. Identify areas where corruption, exploitation, or exclusion exist in your community, in your relationships, or even in this church. Where do you see systems that harm the vulnerable, and how can you stand against them? How can we practically protect against that happening? Challenge injustice. Third thing, we'll run through these ones. Challenge the spaces. Recommit to creating spaces in your life of worship that are inclusive, prayerful, and life-giving. Are there areas of your life, your home, your relationships, your church, that need cleansing and realignment with God's purposes? Do we have enough spaces of worship in our life? Or are we just on the rat race and we're just running and we never have a moment to stop and to have those times, those spaces in our life where we can worship God in the different areas of our lives? Fourth thing there, challenge power. We talked about this last week, but we're bringing it up again. Lead through humility and service with justice in your personal and public life. Jesus fought against corruption, not with violence. That's one thing I need to learn. You don't fight against corruption with violence, but with truth and love. How can you live out this kind of leadership? I like our church. I think we're generally friendly. Like, get me on a bad day, that might change, but I think we're generally friendly, welcoming group of people. But we need to be constantly searching our hearts and our lives for corruption or for exclusion. So we risk losing, otherwise we risk losing being a place of true worship and a place of true impact. We want to continue to be a place where everyone, regardless of background or status, finds a place to belong, finds a place to discover a relationship with God, and to thrive in their walk with Jesus. Imagine a community that doesn't exploit the vulnerable but uplifts them. This is a place where that starts. It should be a place where we're known for that. Our church motto is genuine community, practical faith. That's, as Ash has mentioned, that's kind of what we're focusing. Well, a friend of mine, their church saying is, no perfect people allowed. And I love that saying, because it brings out, we're all messed up people. We've all got our issues. We've all got our problems. We're all going to be facing these issues we're talking about today, these challenges throughout our lives. We're all broken. None of us have it together. We want all people to know, though, that they're welcome here and that we seek to worship God together and learn to follow him better. We will see transformation when that happens. We'll see change, but we can't get complacent in our mission for this to continue to occur. Jesus didn't cleanse the temple for the sake of judgment. He did it to restore its purpose. Let's commit to following him, restoring true worship and justice, starting in our own lives. Next week, we're going to continue with Jesus in the temple, but this time he's going to be teaching, and he's going to be teaching some things that are going to change people's whole idea. Flip everything on its head again. A radical view he presents to those listening. But as we go, what corruption or what complacency do we need to deal with this week in our lives? What's something? Just pick one thing. One thing you're wrestling with, one thing you're struggling with. What is something we can do this week to help that in our lives as we go? But most importantly, do you understand here today that Jesus came to deal with sin in your life, to provide you with a way of forgiveness through his act of sacrifice on the cross? And he offers you the free gift of salvation by believing in him and asking him into your life, to be the forgiver of your sins, to be the leader of your life, to lead you to the life that he has for you, the plans that he has for you. He's offering that to you today. If you've not realized that yet, that's the greatest decision you could ever make, to trust him with your life. As I was talking to the youth about last night, the cool thing about Jesus is like the people around us, they know us based on what we've done in the past and what we're doing right now. Jesus knows you also, but your future potential and what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be doing, and he still loves you. And he thinks you're amazing because of that. He sees you, he cares for you, and like no one else, he knows past, present, and future, and he loves you for it and wants to lead you to the best in that. He is the best person to trust your life with. I hope you will realize that. Let's all stand together, and I'm going to go to the Lord in prayer, and then we've got some time to maybe invite you to stay and have some morning tea with us, and the lady's going to lead us in a closing song as well. But let me just pray and as they come and get ready for that. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love and care for each and every one here today. And I know we mess up. We are sinners saved by grace. And we'll continue to mess up, and we'll continue to mistreat people, and we'll continue to make mistakes. And I thank you that you love us anyway. And I thank you that you want to lead us to become better. Better for us and better for those around us. So I pray that we can help us to trust you and follow you in this life, Lord. Help us to be people who can search their own hearts first. What is there in my life that shouldn't be there? That will help me better be more like you. And I pray as we go, Lord, you help us with that. Help us this week in the struggles we face. Be there with us, God. Walk us through these trials and help us know your presence with us, we pray. Thank you, God.